Very much. So, did you all understand what lobbyists are all about? Yes? No? No? Okay. Just to kind of frame the argument, do you know which area of the US is the most wealthy? Which area in the US has the most wealthiest per capita is the most wealthy?
Do you know the state?
Yes.
California?
No, actually, no, sorry, not the state, but the area. Because California is very big compared to maybe, New York or New Jersey, right? The area, you could say like Houston or Detroit or something. Can you guess?
Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, close, but no. Washington, DC, right? Why? I mean, Silicon Valley is where all the tech millionaires and billionaires are, right? Why is it that the richest people in Washington? Well, the lobbyists like to hang around in Washington. They have houses there, right? And these people, there has been so much money going into lobbying in the US that they say it's out of control. And it may be out of control that the center of government, the government area, right, has the most wealthiest people, like wealthier than Silicon Valley. It seems a little twisted. Just wanted to kind of repeat that. Not repeat that, but just kind of underline that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the material myself and then I'll ask questions. So let's go. Line 3. Something is out of balance in Washington. Corporations now spend about $2.6 billion a year on reported lobbying expenditures. More than the $2 billion we spend to fund the House and Senate. It's a gap that has been widening since corporate lobbying began to regularly exceed the combined House-Senate budget in the early noughties. Today, the biggest companies have upwards of 100 lobbyists representing them, allowing them to be everywhere, all the time. Okay, Kaori-san? Why do you think corporations hire lobbyists?
I still don't get what lobbyists do, but maybe the company wants to earn some profit from the information of the government.
Information? You mean buying information? That's illegal.
Otherwise,
Advice? Well, so lobbyists, corporations hire lobbyists to advise government.
advise the company about
Well, that's what corporate lawyers do. Lawyers and lobbyists sometimes are kind of, some lobbyists are also lawyers. Most lobbyists are lawyers, right? But as you say, companies need advice when it comes to the law, rules and regulations. The lawyers will give them advice on that. Lobbyists, they kind of do similar things, but they actually advise the government on what they should do. Right?
for the company.
For the company, yes. So the company will hire some lobbyists to go to Washington and go to advise the government and say, if you change this bill, you're going to cause problems for this industry, or you're going to cost jobs. You're going to lose jobs if you change this rule. So don't change it. Or maybe they want a change in the rule, right? So they will go and advise the government, right, on the laws that they're making, right? Remember, politicians are not lawyers, right? Politicians are people like Trump, not a lawyer, right? But yeah, they make law, yeah? So they need advice, right? But when the corporations start paying lobbyists to go and give advice, then it's bias. Do you know bias? 偏る. It's not 独立しない, of course. They're not independent lobbyists. They have clients. Okay? Let's move on. Line 9. For every dollar spent on lobbying by labor unions and public interest groups together, large corporations and their associations now spend 34. Of the 100 organizations that spend the most on lobbying, 95 consistently represent business. Okay, so that's like 95% of lobbyists are for corporations, not for people like you. Line 13. One has to go back to the Gilded Age to find business in such a dominant political position in American politics. While it is true that even in the more pluralist 50s and 60s, political representation tilted towards the well-off, lobbying was almost balanced by today's standards. Labor unions were much more important, and the public interest groups of the 60s were much more significant actors. Very few companies had their own Washington lobbyists prior to the 70s. To the extent that businesses did lobby in the 50s and 60s, typically through associations, they were clumsy and ineffective. When we look at the typical lobby, concluded the three leading political scientists in their 1963 study, American business and public policy, we find its opportunities to maneuver are sharply limited. Its staff mediocre, and its typical problem, not the influencing of congressional votes, but finding the clients and contributors to enable it to survive at all. Okay, so in the 1970s, there was a big change, right? In America, there was some civil rights movements, right, before the 70s, and then there was a lot of activities, by public interest groups. But in the 70s, that all changed. Okay. Now, so let's this is all very theoretical, right? So let's do a little exercise. Ahmed-san,
Yes.
if you were Google, right? If you're working for Google, if you're the CEO of Google, what would you lobby for? What would you want to hire lobbyists for? What would you want them to do?
Okay. Lower taxes.
Okay.
And like make more flexible law for artificial intelligence.
I don't think there's any laws about that.
Yeah, but I'm sure it will come because all this program will take people's job, and I would like to protect myself.
Okay, so Google would like to protect themselves, or would like
To make a law that make easier to fire people and to replace them by programs.
Okay, so you will lobby for tax, and you will lobby for labor law,
And the last one for data propriety of people.
privacy.
Privacy of people that they can use as they want.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
And these are some of the areas that they lobby very actively for. Right. So if you're, if you're in a position like Google, right, then you want to make sure that your profits in the future are secure, right? You want to be able to influence government to make the laws that suit your business and not other businesses or other people, right? Remember, these companies are there to maximize profits. Okay. Great answer, thank you. Let's see, Junko-san. If you were Takeda Seiyaku, what kind of lobbying would you want to be involved in? What would you want your lobbyists to do? Pharmaceutical companies are some of the very big spenders on lobbying.
I will hire the lobbyist for claim. It's medicine. The sales sell a lot of medicine, so it might have some problem or no reaction.
So you'll lobby for consumer protection? Against consumer protection?
That's right.
Oh, okay. No, it's very aggressive, I'd say. Okay. What else?
And also, the medicine company needs some people to use medicine, like trial,
Clinical
Before-
trials.
like before sale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So more relaxed rules on clinical trials and bringing new drugs to the market.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. And probably for patent protection as well, yeah? Tokyo. So if you develop a new drug and then a generic company comes and copies that in 10 years or 20 years, you want it protected by 40 or 50 years, of course. Great. Eddie-san, if you were Toyota, what would you lobby for? Toyota 自動車。No idea? Anybody? Maki-san, how about you? If you were Toyota?
Well, I will hire the lobbyists to make a tax law for the cars
Yeah.
and to contribute a lot of laws
Laws?
to run a car anywhere in the mountain or
I don't understand. Mountain? Run what? Drive on the mountain?
drive on the mountain.
How? I think you can probably drive in the mountain if you want to.
If there is no roads, we can.
You can or cannot?
We cannot.
So you make laws that you can.
Yeah. It's,
But there's off-road vehicles. I don't understand.
if there is a lot of roads,
Regulations.
regulations.
Okay. So you would like the government to roll back the regulations
Yeah.
so more people can spend time in their cars. Okay. And what about tariffs and exporting? Because Toyota is a big exporter, right? Right. So you definitely want lobbyists sitting at the TPP negotiation table, right? So all these big corporations have interests, right? They need to make sure that the government does not do something that will hurt their businesses. And that's where lobbyists come in. Just remember that. Right? They are there because corporations can use them. Right? That's what a lobbyist is. Okay, let's move on. Line 26. Things are quite different today. The evolution of business lobbying from a sparse, reactive force into a ubiquitous and increasingly proactive one is among the most important transformations in American politics of the last 40 years. Probing the history of this transformation reveals that there is no normal level of business lobbying in American democracy. Rather, business lobbying has built itself up over time, and the self-reinforcing quality of corporate lobbying has increasingly come to overwhelm every other potentially countervailing force. A difficult paragraph here, but I just want to kind of add that lobbying is international as well, right? So it's not just Japanese companies lobbying in Japan, but back in the bubble era, Japan had a massive lobbying presence in Washington, right? So some of the great Japanese companies made sure that they had lots of lawyers near American politicians to make sure that tariffs remained low and that there was no problems with US-Japan trade. But that lobby is almost dead now. There's no more Japan lobbyists. There are lots of Chinese lobbyists. Okay. Line 34. It has also fundamentally changed how corporations interact with government. Rather than trying to keep government out of its business, as they did for a long time, companies are now increasingly bringing government in as a partner, looking to see what the country can do for them. Marcel-san, do you think that this is a problem? That companies are now trying to bring in the government as a partner to see what they can do for them?
Yes, I think it's a big problem because it's not equal. It's depend on the company. They manipulate the government, so
Yes. Well, I mean, everyone manipulates everyone, right? To a certain extent. So you think the only issue here with you is that it's
not fair.
not fair. Why is it not fair?
If you cannot afford the lobbyist,
Okay. It's not fair.
yes.
Okay. Any other problems with this kind of relationship? Yes.
If the government is in the company, it will try to protect the interest of that company. That's one of the dangerous things. And the other thing is, like people work for the country, for the government,
Mm.
and then the government will work for the company.
That's, yeah, exactly right. So you're talking about public officials
Exactly.
cooperating with private enterprise.
Yeah.
But public officials are there being paid out of the taxpayers' taxes. So everybody here is paying the taxes, I assume. And if you're paying somebody in government to run the country, but then they are going and doing things for a company and not for you, for the company, then it's a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest, well, 利害関係. You should remember this if you don't know this. 利害関係. Do you know this thing, Junko-san? No? Do you know it in Japanese? 利害関係?
利害関係
Yeah.
in Japanese I know.
Yeah. So there's a big conflict of interest if government starts working with corporations when the people who are putting the government in that position are not being represented fairly, right? Okay, let's move on. Line 38. If we set our time machine back to 1971, we find a leading corporate lawyer earnestly writing that, as every business executive knows, few elements of American society today have as little influence in government as the American businessman, the corporation, or even the millions of corporate stockholders. If one doubts this, let him undertake the role of lobbyist for the business point of view before congressional committees. That lawyer was soon to be soon to be Supreme Court Justice Lewis F. Powell, Jr., whose now famous Powell Memorandum is a telling insight into the frustration that many business leaders felt by the early 1970s. Congress had gone on a regulatory binge in the 1960s, spurred on by a new wave of public interest groups. Large corporations had largely sat by idly, unsure of what to do. Okay, so just to give a little background here, I mean, in the 1950s and 60s, there was many social movements in America, right? So things about discrimination, about the war in Vietnam, and things like that. And then there were many public action committees, right, that came out of these movements. So, for example, equal employment opportunities. Does that mean anything to you? Equal employment opportunities? Marcelo?
Equal is ECO, equal.
No, equal.
Equal.
平等.
Men and women equal.
Yes, equal pay for men and women, or to end workplace discrimination, so hiring non-white people, making sure that they get jobs as well. But these are regulations, right? These regulations control how corporations can behave. So there was a lot of activity in this area, and also the Environmental Protection Agency, right? So the amount of CO2 that you can emit, and if you think about the cars that you have, do you all have cars? No one has a car? Cool, me neither. Right? But maybe your parents had cars, and those cars before the what do you call it? The emissions were not so controlled, right? So it's very kind of dirty for the environment. But the regulations have got a lot stronger in the 70s to protect the environment, right? But all of that is a cost for companies. Right? It means their costs go up. It means they have to research more to create better engines that don't pollute the air so much. So that creates a need for companies to try to reduce the regulations in this area, and that's where the lobbyists come in. Okay. Line 48. In 1972, against the backdrop of growing compliance costs, slowing economic growth and rising wages, a community of leading CEOs formed the Business Roundtable, an organization devoted explicitly to cultivating political influence. Alcoa CEO John Harper, one of the Roundtable's founders, said at the time, "I think we all recognize that the time has come when we must stop talking about it and get busy and do something about it." Okay, so this question goes to you, Saki-san. Now, it's all very well that CEOs decide to get active in lobbying, right? They make a decision to hire lobbyists. But politicians also need to be open to having discussions with lobbyists. Why would politicians welcome lobbyists to the negotiating table or to the discussion table? Why would politicians even meet with lobbyists?
Because they need some money.
Money?
I don't know.
Well, what do you mean money? Money is a very ambiguous term. What do you mean, like brown paper bags? Envelopes filled with cash? No, right? What do you mean by money? Is it cold? Is it okay? Yes?
Politicians, they need some vote for some
Votes.
votes.
Yes.
So they want to elect it.
Yes.
Want to be elected. So they need some biggest votes. Some.
They need campaign. They need to run a campaign, right? So when Koike Yuriko goes to run a campaign, she has, of course, it's going to cost money, right, to run a big campaign. So campaign contributions, right? Contributions, donations made by lobbyists acting on behalf of their clients, the corporations, can make donations to politicians so that they can keep their jobs, right? That's allowed. But the Tanaka Kakue sort of thing is not allowed, right? And there was another guy, recently, Abe Seiken, いたじゃないですか。TPP の交渉してた人。麻生太郎じゃなくてもう一人いたじゃん。Amari, right? He took bribes. That's bribery. But a campaign contribution is okay. Why else? Why else would politicians talk to lobbyists? Kaori-san? Okay, for advice.
So maybe they don't have enough information about investment.
Yes. Okay, so they need expert counseling counsel. Yes. So the politicians, if they're making laws, right, that will have an effect on how corporations how they can do business, then the lobbyists will come down and they will give advice to the politicians. You should put this in, or you should take this out, or change the wording. And sometimes they will say, oh, I will write it for you. Right? So if the lobbyist says, I will draft the bill for you, okay, but the politician is very busy doing some other stuff, is very helpful, right? You're right. And other times it's also the case that the lobbyist is a friend of the politician, right? Okay. Let's move on. Line 54. This sense of an existential threat motivated the leading corporations to engage in serious political activity. Many began by hiring their first lobbyists, and they started winning. They killed a major labor law reform, rolled back regulation, lowered taxes, and helped to move public opinion in favor of less government intervention in the economy. Okay. But how do they do it? What are their methods? What are the methods of lobbyists? Any ideas?
Keep telling you that.
So just constant meetings?
Yes.
Okay. How lobbyist method? Remember, this is big business, right? So they have lots of ways they can influence people. Many meetings with their counterparts, right, their politicians. Any other ways? I mean, if you had a lot of money, right, if you were a lobbyist and you needed to influence government, influence certain politicians, and you had lots of money and lots of people you could kind of use, what would you do? Yes, officer.
Like, I can imagine threatening, manipulate, compromise politician, three methods.
What you mean? What, blackmailing?
Like threatening would be if like you don't do this law, I can go to your competitor, or I can like financially support another person.
Oh yes.
This is like kind of threat, like not direct threat.
Okay. So if your politician is not receptive to your needs, you can take your business elsewhere. You can take your campaign contributions
Exactly.
and take it to the other party.
Or like even like by moving your factories from the area, or like have a lot of unemployment. Or
Excellent. So reverse pork barrel politics. Do you know what pork barrel politics is? It's Japanese politics 101. Pork barrel, cheek seiji. Right, so for example, JR, right? JR is a big kind of semi-state owned company. Yeah. I think Ishikawa-ken is a very strong politically, so they can have a big station. For example, what do you call it? The Shinkansen going through a small town, right? In that politician's area, that politician is going to be very popular in his area if he manages to get a Shinkansen station, right? That's pork barrel politics. Or a politician may be very popular if he builds a bridge somewhere in Shikoku or something that nobody lives, right? Saki-san, you're from Shikoku?
sorry.
Okay. But it could be, just as an example, right? You build a bridge that nobody will use, but you're creating jobs for the local community, right? If you take that away, right, or if you can kind of negotiate, or you not threaten is illegal, but to kind of imply that your support will go elsewhere to a different candidate, that's like the reverse of pork barrel politics, right? To try to kind of take the rug from underneath the politician. You can do that, yes? Okay, what else? There's plenty of methods. But this is a very, very aggressive method, I would say. Tamiko-san, what would you do?
Show them what kind of benefits they can have.
How?
For example, if they loosen the regulations or law, and the company can increase their job and increase hiring, maybe that can benefit to companies.
Yeah. So, what? Have you ever heard of a think tank? Think tank. Do you know? Think tank. In Japanese, I don't know how. 東農集団 No?
We say think tank.
Oh, you say
Same thing, yes.
Yeah. So you can sponsor a think tank, right? Think tanks, they don't just appear out of nowhere, somebody funds them, right? But a think tank can be used in many ways, right? A think tank sounds like it's a very intellectual community, right?
Yeah.
But is it academia?
Actually, no.
Right. Right, so it's not academia, it's not business, somewhere in between is a think tank. But it sounds smart, right?
Yes.
So you would, maybe a normal layperson who doesn't really know what a think tank is may think that this is actually an authority, right? It's maybe they do a lot of good research. Yeah, but that research may be very biased to a certain thing. So lobbyists can sponsor think tanks, and some think tanks are actually lobbyists, basically, right? And they can try to, say that it's beneficial to do something. It's beneficial to change the labor laws because maybe people are working too hard, so maybe we need to change something. I don't know. It could be anything, right? They could research something, and then maybe the media will pick it up, and then they will try to influence the public debate, right? So think tanks are very useful tools for lobbyists, right? So next time you hear next time you see a think tank quoted, you should check out who pays them, right? What else? No, yes.
Mass media.
Mass media?
Yeah.
How?
We usually hear that lobbyists controlling media by showing that like politician is good or bad, or even changing the view of people about any topics.
Mm-hmm.
So they shift a little bit the opinion, like the original opinion, from where they want the people to move.
Mm. I want specific kind of ideas. Remember, we have to try to apply, right? How to apply a certain tactic. How do you use the mass media? How would a lobbyist who has lots of money and who has lots of influence and lots of connections in different areas, try to influence the media?
Sometimes they own the media itself.
I don't know, lobbyists, do they own the media?
In the US, sometimes yes.
Well, the corporations advertise with the media,
Okay.
so they may not necessarily have to own the media. I mean, Rupert Murdoch owns most of the media himself, but he has customers, which are big corporations, so he would have to listen to his customers sometimes. But I don't know if the lobbyists necessarily own the media, but I think they have ways of trying to influence media, and one of the ways that they do that is, for example, newspapers, right? Newspapers, what are some influential newspapers? Which newspapers are good? Not the Sun, yeah. Right? But
Times?
Times, yeah, okay, Times.
The one you buy with your money.
Yeah, the paid newspapers, of course. So I'm talking like Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, Nikkei here. But sometimes lobbyists can arrange for letters, right? They will write a letter protesting a certain regulation or recommending a certain type of regulation, and then have it signed by 20 economists or 1,000 SMEs, right, in protest of a certain action, right? Do you know what I'm talking about? No? Lobbyists will arrange for a public letter to the government, right? And then they will ask friends or their connections, or sometimes people they make up, then they say that they're economists, so it sounds like they are credible. I could say I'm an economist, really I can. But that doesn't mean I'm credible. But they can get a letter signed by people who say they're economists, and then send that to the Financial Times, and then have that printed, right? And show that these people are opposed to a certain action, right? That's one way the mass media is kind of manipulated into, into being used by lobbyists for, whatever they're lobbying for. Does that make sense? Yes? So, use media to engineer following, e.g. open letters, open and signed letters. Okay. What else?
How about to use SNS? Like,
How?
well, I've heard the previous American election, Trump, the tweet or Facebook.
Yes.
The stuff, with a lot of messages, Trump is put something to buzz up,
To what?
to make a sensation thing.
Oh yes, we did a lesson on that. Remember?
Yeah.
But I don't think that was the lawyers doing it necessarily. No, I mean anyone can kind of go on SNS. And maybe the lobbyists can hire consultants to influence debate on SNS.
Yeah.
Sure, but lobbyists themselves going in and typing in stuff.
They are hiring stuff.
Yeah, they can do that. So actually, when it's not just SNS, but because the internet is open, right? What lobbyists can do is they can hire consultants to use guerrilla tactics. Geridasen, right? So kind of influencing through SNS or SEO. So, for example, if there is a negative story about a certain politician or about a certain regulation, they can try to kill it by hiring search engine consultants to write stories and then try to get that down in the search engine rankings. Or also Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia, that's the reputation of the companies, right? If you search a company on Wikipedia, you can find lots of information about that, but you can edit that, right? So they do hire consultants to go and fiddle around with open pages on the internet, right? Okay. Any other ways? There's many, many ways. Junko-san. How about hiring. You cannot bribe a politician directly, but you can hire their family. Hiring politicians family, right?
Is it legal?
Yep.
And if the politician do a favor for the company, it's still legal?
Yeah. As long as the politician is not directly receiving money for it, right, and is receiving benefits in other ways, then yeah, sure. Actually, I don't have the names on me right now, but there's plenty of U.S. politicians who have family members who are their lobbyists, basically, right? So it's and also amakudari is another one as well, right? So if you think about retiring politicians being kind of saying, we can't give you money right now, of course, but if you do something good, then you can go and work for Google. That's possible. Actually, there's a lot of politicians who work for Google. Google is the biggest lobbyist in Washington. All right. So that's another way lobbyists. That's another method that lobbyists can use. Right. You see, it gets very dirty. Right. What else?
When I said previous, compromising politician,
Mm-hmm.
controlling, like, I don't know, like blackmails and things.
Blackmail is a very serious crime. Right.
Okay.
So, the way these are lawyers, they know, lobbyists are lawyers, right, basically. They know their way around the law. They know the loopholes, they know how to do things, do bad things without getting arrested. And some lobbyists have been arrested because they have been caught handing cash or maybe trying to extort someone. Those are bad lobbyists, the ones that get caught. And the smart lobbyists, they don't get caught. So blackmail is not, I wouldn't say, is one of the methods that lobbyists use. There's there's lots of kind of committees or associations, right? Setting up or joining So one of the biggest lobbyist group is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I go there often. There's many lobbyists that I meet. They're always there. But if a company is lobbying, it doesn't look good, does it? Because it looks like the company is just trying to do something for its own benefit. But if an association is lobbying, right, it's a group of companies. A group of companies with similar goals. It could be the Pharmaceutical Association, or it could be the Internet Association, right? If they group together and then they change their name to an association or cooperative or an agency or something, then it gives them a kind of, people think of them differently, right? Than if a company directly lobbies, right? So it's an indirect form of lobbying. And then what's interesting is, if you set up these associations and then you put somebody who seems independent, like an ex-chief of police or something, somebody who's very respectable, right? And you put that person in at a high-level position to go and negotiate with government, one of their friends, right? Then it's easier to get the job done. Right. these are some of the methods, and they also have techniques, right? Techniques remember, these are lobbyists, right? The lobbyists, I mean, these are lawyers as well. So they are very, very good at arguing, right? Have you ever dealt with lawyers? Never? Okay. So lawyers are very good at logical fallacies. There's a kind of 論理的な、なんていうんだろう。How do you say fallacy? Anybody have a dictionary on that? Fallacy. 論理的であるように装ってちょっと違う。論点を外すとか。Right?
ちょっと難しい。
語尾 Yeah, they're very difficult. It's a fallacy, right? A way of arguing. So, if, Kiben, okay, yes, Kiben, yes. So, let's see. You all are just consumers, right? And then I am a lobbyist, and if I say that we need to get rid of the privacy protection for all of you so that I can sell your data, what would you say to that? No, you are anti-capitalist, right? You are killing innovation. You are making our country weaker because you are making it difficult for American businesses to do business, right? So that's a logical fallacy, right? Just because you want to protect your privacy doesn't mean that it's reasonable for me to then say that you are anti-capitalistic, right? That's different. But this is what they do, right? So they will change the debate. They will kind of twist the debate in public, right? That's one example. But some of these lobbyists are very, very good at changing the discussion. For example, there was one case in England where they were going to build a high-speed train from one end of the country to another, right? And there was lots of opposition to that because it's not only a few rich people would go on that train because it's a very, very expensive train, right? But there's lots of taxpayer money going into it, and of course there's lots of opposition. But then they brought some lobbyists in, and then they changed the discussion in public, right? First, the argument was that this is a waste of money. But then the lobbyists changed it to a bunch of rich people that don't want a railway going through their gardens, right? Rich people in the middle of England, right? It's just completely changing the discussion. But they are masters at doing this. They're masters at logical fallacies, right? So if something seems unreasonable, probably some lawyer has advised them to change the way that they frame the argument, and they're very, very good at that. Can you think of any situations recently with that have the debate has changed? Can you think of any? No? Yeah. Well, just next time you're watching the news, just see how do the newscasters frame the discussions, right? is it really reasonable or not? I wonder. Okay. So there's obviously many other methods that lobbyists use, but I think this is a pretty good list already. So we can move on. But before we move on, actually, why is it important, do you think, to understand how lobbyists work? Why is it important to understand their tactics? Saki-san.
Because we know the way of this company, so we can see the truth.
Yes, the truth.
Maybe they cover or mislead. They want to mislead
The public.
So
Yes, I totally agree with that. If you understand their methods, it's like understanding the enemy and what they are doing, right? And then almost everything happens for a reason, right? Almost everything is there for a reason. This building is here for a reason and is paid by Shinjuku Ward, right? For a reason. Why? Why is this here? It's not because they're nice, it's because somebody lobbied for it, right? So it makes sense to understand how the world works, I think, and you're getting closer and closer to the truth by seeing how they operate. Okay, let's move on. Line 59. By the early 80s, corporate leaders were purring. Corporations could have declared victory and gone home, thus saving on the costs of political engagement. Instead, they stuck around and kept at it. Many deepened their commitments to politics. After all, they now had lobbyists to help them see all that was at stake in Washington, and all the ways in which staying politically active could help their businesses. Those lobbyists would go on to spend the 80s teaching companies about the importance of political engagement. But it would take time for them to become fully convinced. As one company lobbyist I interviewed for my new book, Business of America's Lobbying, told me, when I started in 1983, people didn't really understand government affairs. They questioned why you would need a Washington office. What does a Washington office do? I think they saw it as a necessary evil. All our competitors had Washington offices, so it was more, well, we need to have a presence there and it's just something we had to do. To make the sell, lobbyists had to go against the long entrenched notion in corporate boardrooms that politics was a necessary evil to be avoided if possible. To get corporations to invest fully in politics, lobbyists had to convince companies that Washington could be a profit center. They had to convince them that lobbying was not just about keeping the government away. It could also be about drawing government close. One corporate lobbyist recalled when they started, management thought government relations did something else. They thought it was to manage PR crises, hearing inquiries. My boss told me, "You've taught us to do things we didn't know could ever be done." As companies became more politically active and comfortable during the 80s and the 90s, their lobbyists became more politically visionary. For example, pharmaceutical companies had long opposed the idea of government adding a prescription drug benefit to Medicare on the theory that this would give government bargaining power through bulk purchasing, thereby reducing drug industry profits. But sometime around 2000, industry lobbyists dreamt up the bold idea of proposing and supporting what became Medicare Part D, a prescription drug benefit, but one which explicitly forbade bulk purchasing, an estimated $205 billion benefit to companies over a 10-year period. Okay, so on 82, it says that their lobbyists became more politically visionary, right? To be visionary is to be more creative. So let's try to be creative ourselves. You all work for a company or do something for a living, right? Yes? So if you had lots of capital and you had lots of lobbyists that you could call upon, what would you lobby for and how would you achieve it? Anybody? Junko-san. Do you have a job?
Yes.
What do you do?
Yes.
Of what kind of company?
Insurance company.
Insurance. Interesting. What would you lobby for? How would you achieve this? Insurance. Insurance companies have lots of lobbyists.
Really?
Yes. Yes. You work for AFLAC?
No.
What's the
American.
AIG?
I belong to the IT. I'm not sure which one.
Okay. But listen, I've met many lobbyists from insurance companies. So maybe, for insurance companies, one of the things that they want to do is they want to make a lot of money. And they have lots of premiums that they collect from the clients, policyholders, right? But there are kind of rules on what they can do with that money, right? So they probably have to buy lots of government bonds, yes? And they cannot just put all that money into investment, private equity and things like that. So maybe relaxing those rules would be good for insurance companies. Relaxing the rules. 規制の緩和?
Well, the rules is not good for
Why? You want more rules?
Oh.
The insurance company business model, I think, works because you have lots of money from policyholders. You don't have to pay everybody because maybe not everybody will, die, or not everybody will have their house burnt down or something. You collect money, you pay out if there's an accident or something. But the money that you hold, right? You can use that money to invest in equities or bonds or whatever. But I think that there are rules for insurance companies that they have to be responsible with the money that they use from the policyholders, right? I hope so. Yeah. Right. But if they relax the rules and said, okay, maybe your company has to hold, 25% of your funds in Japanese government bonds, right? But they're not the most highest yielding. Maybe you want to put that money into stocks instead, right? And then there'll be more profits for your company. Every company wants profits, right? But if you wanted, the rules are there to protect the policyholders, right? But if you lobbied successfully to relax the rules, then you can be more aggressive and spend your money on equities. But if there's a crash, then the policyholders lose their policies because your company would go bust, right? The rules are there to protect society from greedy capitalists. Just an example. Sorry. Anybody else? Maxa, how about you?
I'm working in a medical machine company,
Mhm.
but the problem is recently government reduced the support for the hospital, so that many hospitals doesn't want to buy new machines.
Medical instruments.
Medical instruments. So that, I would like to use think tank.
A think tank. Oh, okay.
To publish a survey or something.
Mhm.
If the hospital use the newest machine, they have a lot of problems for the clients.
Yeah.
Clients, and they could give a better surgery or something.
Yeah.
And
Or maybe you can try to direct lobbyists to get to maybe use the media, right? So maybe there was a patient who could have gotten better care in a country like Thailand or something. You know, people think Thailand is not as advanced as Japan, but you could say a comparison between this Japanese hospital, this hospital in Bangkok. This hospital in Bangkok has better quality of care than in Japan. Then the Japanese public may say that's not good, right? Again, that's kind of a logical fallacy as well, because it doesn't. Why are you comparing Bangkok with Japan, right? That's a way a lawyer may kind of frame that. Good. Ame-san, that's you.
Let's say if I work for automotive company in Japan, I would lobby to protect myself against foreign companies, like increase taxes a lot.
Yes.
And I would also lobby to have more flexible rules concerning the clean energy and engines, so I don't need to invest on electrical cars. That's main things. And I would lobby also against the rules to say that I need to employ a certain number of people in Japan and relocate everything in the cheapest country in Asia.
Yes.
And lower the taxes, all these things.
Right. How would you do that? What would be your chosen method, your choice of weapon?
I think that maybe the first I would choose is the pork barrel politics,
Oh yes.
saying that we need to export, and if we don't have strong car companies, our the industry will fall down. First, use the media to say that the economy is threatened and this industry have how many million of people and how many families work for it, and if we don't support this industry, it will fall.
But when you say the reverse pork barrel politics,
Yeah.
the pork barrel politics is all about setting up factories or investment projects in politicians' local areas. But you're saying that you want to export those.
Yeah, but I'm like lobbyist. I'm using logical fallacies.
Yes, but maybe your kind of style is not this, but maybe.
I would say the assembly will be in Japan, and all the rest will be somewhere so we'll make big factory for assembling cars, but
Yes.
all the parts will be coming from other countries, and I will focus on the assembly lines.
Okay, the final step of production.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Good. Saxon.
I work on media for medical doctors.
Oh.
So I want to, maybe I lobby for the drug association, medicine association. for sales, so to load a promotion code because it's very restricted and we want to promote the drugs in internet, but it's some prohibit. How to say?
Prohibition. It's prohibited.
So we need some relaxed flow, and then we can do more promotion.
Wait, so you work for the pharmacists? No, doctors?
For doctors, because it is the person who, so for how do we say?
Prescription.
Prescription.
Yes.
The drug is doctor, not pharmacist.
Yes, the doctor gives prescriptions. Yes. Well, you know the pharmacy lobby in Japan. You know the small, not the pharmacy store. Yakuzaishi lobby is very, very strong in Japan.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So if you want to buy drugs online, you can buy it much, much cheaper. Did you know that? Have you ever heard of a website called Osakado?
I don't know.
So-
Never heard.
Some drugs cost a lot of money, right?
You mean Japanese medicine or foreign medicine?
You can buy foreign medicine online, but they're trying to close down these sites all the time because the pharmacy lobby is very, very strong in Japan. They don't want this. But then it's, you know, it clashes with internet companies. They're saying it's not good for free trade. Right? But you know, if you want to buy drugs from overseas, it's very, very difficult. Right? But that's because of the lobbyists, pharmacists. Right? Because you can buy generic yakuhin from generic
We can buy that in pharmacy.
in Japan.
In Japan, but
Yes.
maybe
Yes.
it's
It's still very expensive compared to places like India or Thailand or Singapore. Very, very expensive. So, for example, malaria. When I went backpacking, I wanted to buy malaria pills, but it was like 2,000 yen or something, right?
Here in Japan.
In Japan, yeah. But when I used Osakado, it was a few thousand yen. I had it imported from Singapore, right? But that website probably closed down. Okay. Tamiko-san, you.
Can we talk about insurance company? I don't work for insurance company.
Okay, but if you want, yeah, go. If you want to talk about insurance.
If the government is trying to increase the rate of healthcare percent that we pay for.
Patience.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Futanryo.
So,
Yes.
maybe I want to use Lobbyists to use media or guerrilla tactics.
Guerrilla sen, yes. Guerrilla tactics.
To give them pressure,
Okay.
not to do that.
So you want people to go to more hospitals?
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Masayo-san?
I'm not sure the exact method, but I work for university, so I would lobby to convince the neighbors to get more land to make a campus and work for government to expand more students number of each campus.
So you would lobby against the rights of property holders.
Yes.
It's a pretty aggressive university. Okay.
Reasonable price to become division now, but
Yeah.
Proper way, not winning law.
Yeah. So maybe you could say to a politician, look, we need to make a law because Japan is having many inbound educational tourists and visas, right? So we have to expand our campuses. But if there are some property holders, we need to make sure if we are going to build a university or an educational a building for education, then the rights for property right holders will be less, right? Yeah. Or maybe they can get special treatment. Right, what are you talking about? Okay, thank you. Eddie-san, the sushi business. どうやったら寿司業界でロビーストを使いますか? What would you change? Nothing? You probably food safety is one area that you could possibly do something for. Maybe labeling, food labeling, yeah. Or sanchi toka. Maybe get rid of regulations. We don't want to say where this Indian tuna is from or where this Chilean salmon is from. I mean, salmon is salmon. Maybe. That's just one idea. Right? I don't know what methods you could use for that. But that's just an idea. And Kaori-san, how about you?
お知らせします。まもなくご利用時間が終了となります。
Usually government tend to cut down the budget for a library, especially cultural fairs. So I want to think that it is more important to do some reading activities.
Maybe you could get a petition. A petition is a document that everybody will sign, people will sign to show their support for a certain cause. Petition. Petitions. Now, I came to you last, Kaori-san, because I know that you work at a library, a public. It's funded by the government, right? And you mentioned that every year they're cutting the budget, every year, right? This is actually quite serious because maybe they're connected, that so many lobbyists are funded by corporations, right? Remember, it said here 95 lobbyists, all corporations, so 5% are for public, right? Now, for all these methods that lobbyists have, a lot of them, you need money and influence for that. But if it's a public interest, right? They don't have so much money to be able to hire lobbyists and to give them the tools to do what they do, right? They can't do pork barrel politics and things like that. So, I just want to, it's important to remember that money equals power, really, right? And there's nothing more obvious than just looking at the lobbying profession to see how that money is used to affect our society, right? And to change the rules in society. And that, that's one of the messages I had for this lesson. I hope that you can find something here to apply to your lives, because I think that some of the methods that they use are very creative. So you can learn something from that. I'd be very happy. Thank you for coming today. ありがとうございました。 Thank you very much. The lesson is based on donations, so if you enjoyed it, please leave something. If not, it's okay. There's no pressure at all. There'll be another lesson next